Hello viewers, welcome to my orchid world. Summer season has already started. The Phalaenopsis blooms have started fading away. Most of them has fallen off. Few are there. Since my orchids sit outside in the shade house, they get rain and they get dirty. The flowers also get dirty, but nevertheless it's time we start our work for the Phalaenopsis orchid maintenance. During the summer, the Phalaenopsis orchids grow new roots, new leaves, and the number of joints, leaf joints, start to grow. So we have some to-dos that we need to do for the maintenance of our Phalaenopsis orchids so that they grow very well in the summer season. Let us have a look into the things that we need to do for the maintenance of our Phalaenopsis orchids. The Phalaenopsis spike drains energy from the orchid and it needs high amount of energy for the blooms to open up properly, and so we need to first of all we need to take care of the spike that has been draining out energy from the Phalaenopsis orchid. I have quite a number of Phalaenopsis orchids which you are seeing on the screen. For the orchid to grow properly in the summer months so that they bloom profusely in the winter months, we need to take care of the spike, the flower spike. So what can we do for maintenance of the orchid? We need to check the health of the orchid for our to-do list, future to-do list with the spike. So what we have to do is that we need to check the health of the orchid. If the Phalaenopsis orchid has two less leaves, say one set of leaf and one single leaf, say 3 leaves, so in that case what we have to do is we need to cut off the entire spike, because this spike is draining out energy from the orchid. We need to give time to the orchid so that it grows new leaves and new roots so that it can grow blooms in the winter. We have two options with regards to the spike. Either we can propagate the spike for a secondary spike which grows from an undeveloped bud where there was no bloom, and the second option is we can simply cut off the spike at the base of the spike. So for both the situations we need to have a look at the orchid, at the Phalaenopsis orchid. Suppose the orchid is not in a very good condition, still it has put out a spike. In that case, as I have told earlier, we need to cut off the spike totally. In the second case, we can encourage a secondary spike because only Phalaenopsis orchids have this ability to produce secondary spikes from the very first spike that has already bloomed. What we need to check is an undeveloped bud where the last bloom from the spike ends. From that bloom point, we need to check the next bud which is not developed. This is a potential place, a location where we can encourage a secondary spike. So for development of secondary spikes, we need to cut the spike at the last blooming node and between the undeveloped bud. I'll show you how. My Phalaenopsis orchids are in different kind of conditions, so for some of them I'll cut off the entire spike, and for few of them I will cut the spike at the last node, below the last node, and encourage them for a secondary spike. So this is one Phalaenopsis orchid where I will cut off the spike below the last bloom point and then try to encourage a secondary spike. Have a closer look at the spike. you can see if you observe your spikes that there will be an last bloom point, and after that there will be a node where the bud is not developed. This is a potential point where the secondary spike can grow. So we need to cut in between these 2 points, the last bloom point and the undeveloped bud. So midway between the two we need to cut the spike, and then we do not have to do anything extra. Just after a few days you will see the secondary spike developing from the undeveloped bud point. So these are the 2 points, the undeveloped bud point and the last bloom point. So midway between the two we will cut off the spike and then leave the Phalaenopsis orchid back to its place, and then after few days we can see the secondary spike. Similarly with this spike, there is one undeveloped bud point, and midway between the last bloom point and the undeveloped bud I will cut off the spike. Since this orchid is in proper health, I will encourage the secondary bloom, because secondary bloom is also going to drain energy from the Phalaenopsis orchid. So while choosing from the two options, you need to think about the health of the orchid. If the orchid needs some time to regenerate the energy, you have to give this time to the orchid, to the Phalaenopsis orchid, rather than developing a secondary spike. Cut off the spike at the base and then allow the Phalaenopsis orchid to rejuvenate. After cutting off the spikes, those spikes which have been cut for development of secondary spikes, they are not going to bloom again, because in the cut part of the spike there are no undeveloped buds. So those spikes you can just throw away. Spikes that have been cut at the base of the Phalaenopsis orchid do have those undeveloped buds, because remember that for the rejuvenation of the orchid we have cut off the entire spike which had the undeveloped buds as well. So for this undeveloped buds we can do our own thing. These spike parts can be grown in a humid condition for development of keikis. This you must have seen in one of my videos, how to grow keikis from Phalaenopsis spikes. Please watch that video if you haven't watched it. So I am going to pick up those spikes which have been cut at the base, which have the undeveloped buds, and I am going to place them in a humid condition. My basic the container part where I have placed some sphagnum moss, I keep them moistening, and there I will place these spikes. They will get humidity and maybe they will develop keikis. Just it's an experiment. It may not yield 100% result, but there's no harm in trying. I'll place those spikes in that humid condition, in that humid environment, and keep you updated if any keiki develops. So this has the undeveloped bud. As you can see, spike has been cut at the base from one of my orchids which has white blooms. As you have seen that orchid in many of my videos, the mother plant is dying and it has produced a keiki. That keiki has not developed properly, but this has produced a spike this year, and so for proper development of the keiki I cut off the spike at the base of the orchid. And this spike has undeveloped buds, and this spike will go to the humid environment, and let's see if a keiki develops. Last year a keiki developed, the two leaves had developed, but ultimately the heat made it impossible for the keiki to survive. The keiki didn't survive because of the extreme heat, and this year I'm going to try again. Let us see. I'm hopeful. Few of my species Phalaenopsis orchids are producing buds still, and so I am not going to cut those spikes. These are species Phalaenopsis orchids. One of the species is currently in spike. It has not bloomed. It has grown bigger, longer spike than last year. I will keep you updated with the blooms when they come. It has branched also, and this is the Violacea, and this is the Bellina, which is not bloomed. This is the Tetraspis, very beautiful blooms. So Once the buds fall off, I'll just cut off the entire spike. This is my favorite Sogo Relax, which is still in bloom after 3 months. The Sogo Relax is a very healthy orchid. I will say that this is the healthiest orchid that I have, and it is already in bloom. It has been draining energy from the orchid, but still there are so many blooms. The orchid is also healthy. There are many blooms, and once the blooms fade away, let me see how many more months they last, and then after that I'll cut off the both the spikes. There is a third spike which is not developed, and I am not sure if it will develop after, because the summer months have already started, the growing period has started. I will allow this orchid to grow more so that next year I'll get more buds and more spikes, and it will be a nice show. Next year you will see more spikes on this orchid, more blooms on this orchid, and it will be a very spectacular show. I'm hopeful, and after that I'll just cut off the 2 spikes after these blooms fade away. But the blooms still look very beautiful, very fresh, very fragrant, and the color is just awesome. Here is a little update on one of my mini Phalaenopsis. You can see it was badly damaged and eaten. The leaves were eaten up by snails, but it is growing. It has rejuvenated. There is one small leaf growing this year. Obviously this didn't bloom this year, but next year I am hopeful that it will bloom. It is a survivor, it is a warrior, and it has not lost its battle, and it is still growing. I keep on watering it. I have placed it in a humidity tray, and so here it is. The roots are quite healthy, and I am hopeful it will bounce back and it will bloom next year. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. Hope you got some tips from it. Please let me know how you found this video, whether it is good or bad, whether it is useful for you, and keep watching my channel. Do check out my other videos and give it a like, and do subscribe to my channel, and always thank you for watching.